record, so we'll have a little less video, but that's okay. We got the audio.
And I have a bubble of love song too if it comes up again.
Okay. How are you feeling?
I'm okay. I'm good.
Good. Okay, good. So because we'll have this one segment and then um we'll bring you in to answer that last question. So I'm just gonna kind of hone in on some of these questions that I think will really help a lot of women. Maybe talking about a little bit about that human giver syndrome. And I love what you talked about the bikini industrial complex, which is, I
Okay.
think, you know, in the BMI chart, that blew my mind because there's
Me
part of
too.
me, yeah, because I have a background in personal training and fitness, and they always just nail that in to, I'm like, it's bullshit.
Emily had a PhD in health sciences and was like, "Excuse me?" Yeah. She
Yeah.
was also shocked. So,
And if we have time, rest. I think rest is so important for women to understand how important that is and how rest is not just sleep. So we'll see if we can get all that in.
I will aim for shorter, less thorough answers that kind of introduce people to here's how you go down a path to find out more about that.
Yeah. Wonderful. It's so good already. Mm.
All right, coming back in 15.
Empowerment.com. You're listening to Women Thriving Unapologetically with Lynsie McKeown. Have a question for Lynsie or her guests? Want to share your story? Email Lynsie at thrivingunapologetically@gmail.com. That's thrivingunapologetically@gmail.com. Now back to the show. Here again is Lynsie.
Hello and welcome back to Women Thriving Unapologetically. We're here today with Amelia Nagoski, and we're talking about the stress cycle and how there is a lot more stress on women, I believe, than on men. And or maybe I should say it's different. And one of the things that you talk about in your book, you talk about the human giver syndrome and how this can contribute to the stress that women feel in their lives a lot more differently than men's. Can you talk to us a little bit about what the human giver syndrome is?
Yeah, we adapted this from a book called Down Girl, The Logic of Misogyny, which is a book of moral philosophy by Kate Mann. She's a moral philosopher. And in this book, she posits a world where there are two kinds of humans. There are human beings who have a moral obligation. It's a book of moral philosophy. So the human beings have a moral obligation to be their humanity, to live it, to express it, to acquire whatever resources are necessary in order to accomplish that. And on the other hand, there are human givers who have a moral obligation to give their time, their lives, their bodies to the human beings. And remembering that this is a book called Down Girl, The Logic of Misogyny, which group do you think she's saying the women are? Yeah, it's the human givers. But this is not just a gender dynamic, it's a power dynamic. So it happens across all the intersections. White people tends to feel entitled to the time, lives, and bodies of people of color. You know, people who speak the dominant language in the US, it's English, tend to feel entitled to the extra work of people who don't speak English as their first language. So at every intersection, there's this feeling of a power dynamic of entitlement and moral obligation to give. And a lot of people respond to the idea of human giver as like, yeah, I do feel a moral obligation to give to the people around me, to care for them, to support them. And indeed, being a human giver, if we were all human givers and the whole society was made up of people who feel a moral obligation to care for those around them, we would have a fantastic society. Nobody would burn out. Nobody would slip through the cracks because there would always be someone else there. Everyone around them would be turning toward them with kindness and compassion and telling them that they deserve the resources they need to get rest and to eat nutritious food and to care for themselves and to be cared for. But we don't live in that world. We do live in a society where some people are told that they are not only entitled to the givers, but in fact, they are morally obliged to take. And that puts a lot of pressure on both the human beings and the human givers, and it creates a dynamic where human giver syndrome becomes a toxic and dangerous thing. And for women, this can look like feeling a moral obligation to be at all times pretty, happy, yet calm, generous, and attentive to the needs of others. And if at any time you fail in your moral obligation to be at all times pretty, happy, calm, generous, and attentive to the needs of others, then you are a failure. And as a failure, you deserve to be punished. And even if there's no one else around to punish us, we will go ahead and punish ourselves. And the last symptom that perhaps you're living in an environment of people feeling entitled to what you have to give is that you feel like this is just normal and true. Of course I feel this way. Of course, it is my obligation to exist in the world as a tube of toothpaste, to be squeezed until empty and then discarded. And a lot of us kind of feel like that's just normal and true. And that's human giver syndrome as opposed to being just like being a human giver and thriving in a community of givers who all care about each other. So what that looks like for women is super dangerous. I will let you point me in the direction of how to continue with that idea.
Well, because, if the human giver syndrome, if we're feeling this, and I think a lot of women are feeling this at some degree, and how do we, pull away from that? How do we break that cycle? How can we still be givers, but not be a victim? I even hate to use the word victim, but be swept up into this idea that you have to give at all costs, because we want to give. We want to be compassionate and loving beings and have that society where we're showing others how we can live and breathe and be in community, but we don't want to overgive, self-sacrifice and be the martyr.
Yeah, it is. I mean, ironically and unfortunately, a giver has to break free from it on their own cognitively and tell themselves that they deserve to, have resources for themselves. But ideally, it's other givers who help us unlearn human giver syndrome by turning towards us and making it happen that we receive resources and care and time and love and all the things that are not scarce. They're made to feel scarce by the external world, but they're not.
So
if that's really hard to make that love. Again, it's the bubble of love. That's exactly right. But if you're having a struggle with that, or even just accepting care from other people, or really believing that you're allowed to accept care and that you deserve care, the number one step that Emily and I discovered was so helpful was learning to recognize who in our lives acts as a giver and who in our lives acts like they're entitled to our time, our lives, and our bodies. And if we can recognize who the human beings are, we can kind of divest the importance that we ascribe to that relationship, because it can feel like that's one of the most important relationships in your life because it conforms to this dynamic that is so broad. But if we can kind of divest ourselves from this notion that that person matters and holds our lives in our hands, and that person does not, in fact, they are not entitled to our time and our lives and our bodies, even though they believe not only that they are entitled, but that they are required to pursue that entitlement and take as much as they can from you, and focus more energy on interacting with and valuing the relationships with the givers in your life. Did that make sense?
It makes total sense to divest from those that are, expecting and that you give to them, really out of balance to what you're receiving from them. So you just start to spend more times with those that are the givers, so that you get to experience the practice of receiving and being well nourished by those people. And so I think, And so when you're really nourished and well fed, you can understand the dynamics even more, has been my experience.
Exactly. Your body learns what it feels like to be safe and cared for, and it doesn't feel scary to indulge in the luxury of a full night's sleep. Now it's like, oh, this is just what I need. Okay.
And you know,
And
just talking about that
yeah.
full night of sleep, I mean, I love that you definitely point out rest in your book, because that I
Oh, yeah.
speak to this with my clients all the time. We always start with rest. I have a three-tiered approach, and like rest is the first stage. And in your book, you talk about you had this famous quote: "What doesn't kill you makes you stronger."
Yeah.
And we
Yeah.
all have been hearing that, but you challenge us by saying that it's not what doesn't kill you makes you stronger; it's rest that actually makes us stronger.
Right. Because
And
the
that
thing that didn't kill you harmed you deeply. And if you never have a chance to heal from that, you did not get stronger. The only way to heal from that is to rest what was wounded and give it what it needs to heal, and especially rest. And because that's always the first thing that any medical provider will tell you when you have an injury, you need to rest whatever a limb it is, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, it's rest is featured in chapter 1, which is about completing the stress response cycle, because rest, especially sleep, can accomplish that. But rest also gets its own chapter because there are so many ways to rest. There is literal sleep, but there's also daydreaming, mindful eating and cooking. Um, so many, and I don't know how many or which ones you want to talk about.
Gosh, they are so many. But I
Yeah.
really just want to point out that I want to read this real quick. It says, um, rest is quite simply when you stop using a part of you that's used up, worn out, damaged, or inflamed so that it has a chance to renew itself. And it doesn't just mean sleep, though, of course, sleep is essential. It includes switching from one type of activity to another. So, mental energy, like stress, has a cycle it runs through, an oscillation from task focus to processing and back to task focus. So, not you don't have to using grit or self-control to move through something isn't supporting you. It's actually stepping back and taking a moment to rest. That is where you get your what I call the point of power back. And rest, like you mentioned, can be simply moving your body in a different way. It can be breathing, so many different things. So I just want women to understand that when you have a really super busy life, that you can have restful moments that get you out of the stress cycle that you're in, which I thought was brilliant in your book. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I heard you read that and say, wow, we really nailed that. We really
You did.
summarized it.
Good
What a
job.
good book that is. Good for me. Actually, I think Emily wrote that paragraph, but still, good for us.
Yeah. And I think celebration is also a key to us breaking out of that stress cycle. Like, oh, wow. Like when you hear or see something you've done, like celebrate, like you did a really good job. You guys did a great job. And then you break out of that, oh, it's not enough or wasn't good enough. And I could have done
Yeah.
better. So I think that's beautiful that you could acknowledge, wow, we did a really good job on that. And
I was like, yes, that's exactly what I wanted to say. Oh, right. I already said it that
yeah,
way.
you already said it. Done. Job here is done. So, we were talking about some of the damage that can happen through this idea that we have to give of ourselves and we have to look a particular way and act a particular way. And one of the things that has been really damaging is something that you speak of in the book called the bikini industrial complex. And so please, I mean, I was reading this and I was kind of, I was like, yes, that's so true. And then I was blown away by your explanation of the BMI chart, which is the body mass index chart, which so many of us have heard about and tried to fit into. Even our doctors or healthcare providers
Yeah.
try to fit us into it. And you're like,
Yeah.
no, that's another thing that's bullshit. So tell
Yeah,
us
it's a
more about
lie.
it's a total
Yeah.
lie.
Emily has a PhD in health sciences, and even she was shocked to learn this, which is information we first got from the book Health at Every Size by Lindo Bacon. And in that book, they describe the process of the invention of the BMI chart. It was created by a panel of 9 people, 7 of whom profit directly from the weight loss industry. So the BMI chart with these labels was not based on science, it was based on propaganda for selling people products and services related to lowering their BMI. It is just a ratio of height to weight, and it means literally nothing. And yet, it's been invented by this panel, this piece of propaganda that is now used by health insurance companies to determine who is more worthy of certain kinds of care. Like, here's a very extreme example. Back when the initial flood of COVID hospitalizations was happening and there was a lack of ventilators, one of the factors that went into deciding who got a ventilator and who didn't was BMI. So you might be more likely to die of COVID because you have more fat on your body, not because the fat on your body makes you more susceptible to illness, but because the system constructed around using the BMI chart as a thing that makes you more likely to live or not, that disenfranchised you from receiving healthcare. Which, I'm so very angry about that. And then they were like, well, if you're fat, you're more likely to die from COVID. And I was like, yeah, okay. So can we factor in the fact that fat people have a much harder time receiving adequate health care? Because the BMI chart, all of their illnesses are blamed on the fat on their bodies instead of actual facts about if there's an established known bias called scientific weightism, where scientists are just like, because they've been indoctrinated to this multi-billion-dollar weight loss industry, they've been indoctrinated into that diet culture, they just assume fat bad, and therefore the person in front of you who has fat on their body, therefore that is their problem. They have a cold because they have fat on their body. They sprain their ankle because they have fat on their body. They like, oh my God, it makes me so mad. The thing that really busted my gut when it came time to apply this information is when I was teaching college and I had this incoming class, little freshmen, and I was trying to, when you're teaching singing, the first place you start is breathing. And I'm working with college students on breathing, even working with like 9-year-olds in my children's choir. They hold their stomachs in and they gasp in and they hold their stomachs in, and all the breath only goes up into their chest and their shoulders rise up, and that has nothing to do with their breathing. When you breathe, your breath is supposed to go down in your body. Okay, your actual breath stays in your lungs, but in order for your lungs to expand, the squishy stuff inside you has to get pushed out of the way, so that diaphragm in the middle of your body pushes down on all your like squishy organs, all the viscera in your abdomen, and so your abdomen expands outward. Except that you have an abdominal wall, muscles that can be hardened and tightened, and to hold all the squishy stuff in tight, and then it has nowhere to go, so then the breath has nowhere to expand down into. And I'm trying to teach these freshman college women that they need to release their abdominal muscles. They need to let their belly expand. And they literally cannot. They don't know how to manifest the coordination in their body to let their bellies expand because they have been trained by diet culture, by so-called fitness culture, which is a lie. It's not about fitness, it's about thinness, and thinness is about obedience, and obedience is what the society requires from women, and increasingly from men, as the weight loss industry discovers. They've got a whole like half of the population to profit from. I have started ranting again, I realize.
I love it.
Okay.
Go, Amelia. No, I love it all because it's just, I hope the women that are listening to this are really having their minds blown, because it's not, what you just said, it's not about, fitness, it's about thinness. And you're really touching on about how being thin is another privilege, just as race and gender and class is in our society, and how this is feeding in and really hurting a lot of people in our culture that are not fitting in and are not being able to be controlled by.
And in a lot of ways, it's physically fitting in. The infrastructure of the world is designed for people who are smaller than average. So anyone who's average or larger physically doesn't fit in the world through turnstiles, in seats, etc. So the whole world is built to exclude anyone of size.
I think you even touched upon that in the book about how airplane seats are getting smaller, and it's, I'm fairly thin. I'm really tall but I find it really difficult to sit in those seats, and couldn't even imagine how hurtful and harmful that is for someone just wanting to simply travel. How difficult that can be, like you said, turnstiles and And it's just that constant stress that you experience by just being in your own body, and how
Yeah.
that can, that chronic stress is what we're talking about here, is what builds and builds and builds to those symptoms of burnout, or actually being burnt out. And so how, I'm trying to feel into like the enormity of all of this,
Mm-hmm.
and like where do we start really with this. And I think what you've touched on so far is, and there's many things in the book as well, is finding that community, that bubble of love, starting to understand who's taking more of you than they're giving, and divesting from them, nurturing yourself around the people that are willing to give to you as much as you're willing to give to them. But what other ways can we start to, and also just understanding, like, informing ourselves, like, okay, the BMI chart is just
Is a lie.
no, it's a profiteering
Yeah.
uh, tool. And so it's through that education as well. But what other things do you think that women should know? Like, what's something else that they could do to take their power back?
Uh, Thing number one is to know that you are exactly the size you need to be right now. You don't have to lose weight or conform to a specific body shape or size before you deserve love and care, including adequate medical care. Um, Emily and I play what we call the new hotness game. That's a thing that I started because I took a picture of myself in a dressing room mirror and went, "Oh, new hotness," because I was wearing like the largest size dress they made in that particular boutique, and I was like, "Damn, I look awesome in the largest size dress they make at this boutique." And so just we started sending each other pictures back and forth when we were uncertain that what we looked like was going to conform and be adequate for approval. We just take the picture and say new hotness, and new hotness just means deserving of love in the face of pressure to conform. I actually have a song about the new hotness game. But I will also say, in the meantime, whether we decide that we have time for me to sing another song, is that if you have a social media feed of any kind, if you're following anyone who makes you feel inadequate or like they're better than you, and you think you're following because you think they're like motivating for you to change, delete those people from your feed right away.
I
Because the
thank
idea
you.
that shaming yourself is going to motivate you to feel better, nope, shame doesn't do good things for anybody. Shame is dangerous, and I encourage you only to follow people on social media who make you feel like who you are right now is good enough and deserves care. And if you want to change the size or shape of your body, great. You can do that to whatever extent is realistic. You should know that the stories of people changing their weight permanently in one direction or another are mostly just lies. Um,
I
but yeah,
really
so
appreciate you mentioning that. Like, do not follow people that are making you feel bad as a way of motivating you, that not to move from fear or FOMO or fear or body shaming or any type of shaming whatsoever. And I've been noticing this because I'm moving more into what's a more feminine approach to business or supporting women, and not doing those all those tactics of, oh, if you can pinpoint the pain, then you can make yourself seem like the solution. And that's just a toxic tactic that so many people are using now. Instead, like, who's making you feel good, who's truly inspiring you and making you feel your greatness in this moment for who you are, and follow them, because that will be one of the biggest, most empowering things we can do to really shift out of this toxic paradigm. And I really want to honor your time, because Amelia, you were very upfront with me when I reached out to you about being on the show. And you've suffered from long COVID, and you let me know that doing a full show would be really would be taxing on you. And we've kind of gone past our point for the second break. So
I'm
I do
actually doing okay.
you're, I think you're doing fabulous, but I did
I'm
want
doing better than average, so this is good.
but I do want to make sure that you feel really nourished. And if you feel at any point in time that you want to exit the show, that you've reached your max, you let me know, because we are up to our second break.
I want to
Um,
sing the new hotness song when we get back, maybe.
okay, let's do that. So we're going to be right back after this short break. So don't go anywhere, because you're going to get to experience the hotness song. We'll be right back.
All right, great job. All clear. Back into.
So we went over for that second break. So the last break will be pretty short. So but you let me know at any point. You can you just say simply, okay, I'm good, and then I'll finish it up. Or if you feel like we can go through the whole thing, it's really, I'll let me know.
Yeah, if it's basically the new hotness song and the what does thriving unapologetically mean,
You're good.
I feel like, yeah, I had extra caffeine today, and I think maybe that's doing its job.
Okay. Maybe it's just the space of this container.
Maybe it is.
It is my greatest intention to hold like the most loving space for all of our guests and our listeners, and to really be a place of honoring, because I really feel honored that you're here and sharing so much.
Thank you so much for that. That's really nice. But also, I feel like the people remember the songs and they internalize information better when I sing it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not even just like the songs are more fun and more entertaining, but like people genuinely learn more when I sing the songs.
Oh yeah, I think, and I think, well, I teach a lot of yoga, and when we chant and move our bodies at the same time, people actually have that felt experience. So I love that you're sharing this.
Exactly. Yes, that's the mechanism.
There is an intelligence to our method. Okay, we're getting ready to go back.
All right, 10 seconds.
You're listening to Women Thriving Unapologetically with Lynsie McKeown. Have a question for Lynsie or her guests? Want to share your story? Email Lynsie at thrivingunapologetically@gmail.com. That's thrivingunapologetically@gmail.com. Now back to the show. Here again is Lynsie.
Hello and welcome back to Women Thriving Unapologetically. We're here with Amelia Nagoski, and we are getting ready to hear another song from Amelia. Yeah.
It's the new hotness song.
It's
about the game of, trying to exist in the world as someone whose body does not conform to the socially constructed ideal. And may I say, no one's body conforms to the socially constructed ideal. Literally no one. So it goes like this. We're lovable and lovely, but facing the world takes nerve, 'cause the world has views on who we are and tells us what we deserve. But there's some swears in this song, but fuck that noise, the world is wrong, and here's your true theme song. You're the new hotness, she's the new hotness, I'm the new hotness, we're all the new hotness. Everyone is struggling, no one is immune. The less you conform to the socially constructed ideal, the greater is your doom. Regardless of health or wealth or stealth, your body is yours. And hotness just means deserving of love in the face of pressure to conform. The world will be safer for everybody when all of us can sing along. You're the new hotness, she's the new hotness, I'm the new hotness, we're all the new hotness. You're the new hotness, she's the new hotness, I'm the new hotness, we're all the new hotness.
I so wanted to sing along, but I have insecurities about singing. I know you told me this right before we started the show. We're all singers. I'm like, honey, you ain't heard me sing, but
I don't need to.
I know, but it's the same thing with Liz Gilbert always says we're all writers. I'm like, okay, we're all singers, we're all writers, we're all artists, creatives.
We all have the potential.
We all have the potential. And that was incredible. Thank you so much for sharing that we are the new hotness, that we do not need to conform, and it's impossible to conform like to this ideal, I'm going to do air quotes, of what we should look like, because it's just another tactic and tool to try to get us to buy stuff we don't need, and to keep us
Yeah.
keep us small. And the
Keep
smaller
us
we
small
are,
and in our places and feeling like we don't deserve to have a voice or be seen or be cared for until we have done the work ourselves of trying to be what other people say we have to be, even though there is literally no science that says that being thinner makes you healthier. Do the behaviors that they tell us to do, like eating vegetables and getting some exercise, like, are those things good for us? Sure, they could be, unless you're, like I have long COVID. And if I exercise, if I go for a 10-minute mosey through my yard to go pet my dog on the far side of the yard, I end up in bed for 3 days afterward with post exertional malaise. So, like, any advice about how to be healthy is not for everyone. So unfortunately, we got to take on the work of discovering what makes us feel our best.
thank you for that. Like, take on what feels best to you and what makes you feel you're thriving. And so I'd love to, we're nearing the end of the show. So I would love to hear from you. What does thriving unapologetic mean to you, Amelia?
I love to define terms. This is like one of my favorite things. So when we talk about thriving, that makes me go back to in the book how we define wellness. Wellness is the freedom to oscillate through all the cycles of being human. And what that means is, being well is not a thing you just like achieve and then stay there. It's not what you believe about yourself or your environment. It's a state of action. And when I say action, I don't mean it's a thing you have to do all the time. Freedom is a thing that is taken and received from the world around you. You can't have freedom if the world tells you you don't deserve freedom. So being well is having the freedom, both by your own volition and by permission of the world around you, to cycle from stress to safety, from activity to rest, from autonomy to connection. That freedom is wellness. And I would say that thriving is not having any restrictions that prevent you from being able to do that, where you have to take on extra work in order to achieve those free oscillations. And unapologetically, I think, goes back to what you were saying, human giver syndrome. Human giver syndrome is the thing that makes us feel like we need to apologize. Oh, I'm sorry, I need sleep. I'm sorry, I have to eat food today. I'm sorry that I need time off to spend with my kids. I know I'm a burden to the world around me because I don't deserve resources for myself. I have to be pretty happy, calm, generous, and attentive to the needs of others at all times. I know that's my moral obligation. So I think overcoming human giver syndrome and remembering that you deserve care and you deserve love just as you are, that you are already enough. That's where the unapologetic comes from.
Oh, thank
That
you
was
so
a
much.
lot of words. I'm so sorry.
No, no, no apologies necessary, because it's a beautiful, beautiful explanation, and I
Oh
appreciate
my
your
God, I just
thoroughness.
apologized for. Okay.
That's okay. Sometimes it's a habit, but we are
Yeah,
at the
yeah.
end of the show. So I really appreciate you being with us for the full length of the show and sharing so much of yourself and your time and your energy and your wisdom. And you can reach Amelia on her online home at burnoutbook.net. I would highly recommend getting the book. There's so many things that we didn't have time to talk about today on this show, but definitely get the book and read through it and connect with her on her online home and listen to the show again and again. So you can listen to both songs and sing along. And if you are a lover of this show, and just consider being a sponsor or supporter of Women Thriving Unapologetically. It is our mission to provide a global platform for women to expand their reach and share their messages and work. And each show aims to inspire, support, and equip women to reach their highest potential and step into their power to lead, love, work, and live unapologetically. And we're reaching up to 40 countries now. So reach out to me at thrivingunapologetically@gmail.com, and we'll talk about how we can work together to make it happen, because women rise and thrive together. So thank you so much, and many, many blessings and much love to all of you.
All right, great show. All clear.
Thank you, Matt.
You're welcome. All right, you both have a great rest of your day.
You too.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Amelia. That was
Thanks.
awesome. That was so good.
Great.
And I love the addition of the songs. It was just perfect. So, and I'm glad you felt good throughout the show, because I really wanted you to feel strong and good for the rest of your day as well.
Yeah, I'll be fine. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So I'm gonna hit